Chapter 64, Plainview, Texas, Saturday evening, 7:59 p.m. After 2 martinis and a little online research the evening prior, the Finkles had enough to move forward with what they were calling Operation Sandersnatch. Phase 1 of Operation Sandersnatch was already complete, thanks to Marci's half-ass snatching of Alice. On to Phase 2, the face-off. Bill adjusted the strap of his longbow, stepping confidently out the Finkles' front door. Immediately, a shot rang out, the bullet whistling overhead to shatter the porch light. Bill dove behind a row of hedges lining his front porch, searching for his nemesis as Marci's pale face appeared between the dining room window curtains. Bill lifted his bow, eventually spotting Jim's silhouette squatting on the spine of the Sanders roof like a gargoyle, a rifle at one shoulder, useless night vision binoculars dangling from his neck. The Morrisons' tan sedan promptly glided into the Sanders driveway, idling a moment before clicking off, the motor ticking for a beat. Jim dropped to his stomach as the couple stepped out of their car chatting blithely, a crumb cake balanced in Craig's hands. His wife toted a large bottle of Merlot like a newborn. Jennifer Morrison pounded heartily on the Sanders front door to no response, then knocked again, frowning. "Do you think we got confused on the dates?" "Surely not," Craig sniffed, noticing a trickle of gravel pelting the ground behind him and stepping back to peer up at the Sanders roof. "Anyone home?" "Be right down," Jim sang merrily from his rooftop. "Hey, buddy," Craig shouted, squinting up into the setting sun, a hand shielding his eyes. "Putting up Christmas lights already? Please don't give Jen any ideas." "Just getting a jump on things this year," Jim chuckled, ducking behind the chimney stack. Leaning out, he aimed the barrel of the rifle at Bill's head, noticeably bobbing behind a hedgerow. "Just 1 second," Jim stalled, winking one eye shut and pulling the trigger, throwing up a spray of pebbles, grass, and sand, the bullet scoring the Finkles' lawn. Bill popped up, longbow strung and raised, scanning the horizon for Jim before dropping to his knee and loosing his arrow to soar into the Sanders roof tiles with a plonk. Jim leaned back out, firing again before slinking back behind the chimney to the satisfying crunch of the Finkles' rain gutter blowing apart, the undamaged half of it careening down to dangle from the corner of their roof. An arrow sailed over Jennifer Morrison's head, embedding itself in the garage door as Bill slid behind his mailbox, catching his breath and notching another arrow. The Morrisons screamed and dropped their gifts, racing for cover beside their car. "Everything okay, Jim?" Craig called out, patting his wife's hand apologetically. "Sure, Craig," Jim responded, calmly squinting into his rifle scope. "Why do you ask?" Darting forward on the offense, Bill tumbled to his knees as a bullet winged his side, sending him scrambling back behind the shrubs with a moan. The front door flew open, and Marci darted to his side, pressing a dish rag into Bill's bleeding hip and urging him to hold it on his wound before pushing the longbow back into his hand, blowing him an air kiss, and disappearing from his side. "I'm afraid I'm gonna need you to come with me, Jim. The gig is up," Bill taunted, popping up from his cover and notching his bow. Exhaling, Bill released the arrow in the direction of Jim's scornful laughter. Jim screeched as the arrow found its mark, his rifle slipping from his hand to slide down the roof tiles and land on the driveway below with a clatter. Relieved, Bill stepped out from behind the shrubs, his bow at his side in a gesture of peace. A spray of bullets minced the ground at his feet, sending Bill scrambling for cover behind his recycling bins. "No can do," Jim boasted. "I've got another gun and ammo for days. I can dance till dawn if I need to, Bill, but then we'll miss the eclipse, and this will all be for naught. I'd hate to have to do it all over again." With that, Bill realized he'd have to activate Plan B of Operation Sandersnatch if they had any chance of making it to the square on time. "Craig Morrison," Bill shouted, enunciating each word, "your guardian commands you to join the fight." Craig, from his crouched hiding place, stood, a blank expression on his face, mechanically walking to the trunk of his car, where he unloaded an unwieldy short-range rocket launcher and capably hefted it to his left shoulder.
Craig, what are you doing? Where in the world did you get that weapon? We're pescatarians!
A brief history of Plan B. Bill spent his Saturday morning traveling repeatedly back to the yesteryears of Plainview, where, in a series of hastily concocted, somehow extremely effective brainwashing sessions, the times and locations of which were prompted by today's inexhaustible supply of personal information available online, the Finkles weaponized Craig Morrison just in case. It began when poor Craig was 7. Bill found him waiting for pickup outside of the dojo where the young man would be awarded a purple belt that Friday, and mentioned in a small story in the Plainview Weekly paper to be forever reposted on the World Wide Web, and introduced himself as the Guardian, a warrior from a dystopian future, telling the scared young man he had a great purpose in life and should know he was special, promising he would return when Craig was older to give him further instruction. At 13, the Guardian approached Craig after school, and over a hamburger, when Craig should have been practicing for the golf tournament he would place 5th in that Thursday, featured in the Dallas Morning News Athletes to Watch section that Friday, he was made aware of a future in which aliens have used their cyborg lackeys to plunder the Earth, and Craig's pivotal role in saving the planet. Noting Craig's emerging skepticism, Bill gave Craig a tip to buy Apple stocks. A fit, disciplined black belt at 27 with a fine start on his retirement fund, Craig was instructed to take a series of survival classes and begin weapons training. At 38, the Guardian presented Craig with several photos of the Sanders, the cyborgs Craig would eventually need to befriend, which he dutifully had. And finally, last week, the Guardian beckoned Craig from a dead sleep, summoning him to the balcony of his luxury duplex, where Bill explained Craig would soon be commanded to fight alongside him. After this, the Guardian disappeared with a final boom and a whoosh, while Craig knelt in fealty. Now hearing the Guardian's rallying cry, Craig knelt once more, a lifetime of training and preparation crystallizing within him. Squinting his left eye, exhaling as he locked on his target, the fine fibers of the cyborg's hair waving in the wind from his position behind the chimney flume, Craig pulled the trigger. A corner of the Sanders roof disappeared in a ball of flames and a roiling cloud of debris. Jennifer Morrison screamed in horror as her mild-mannered investment banker husband fired a rocket launcher into their host's roof, tossing the weapon aside before pulling a string of grenades from their trunk, which he placed at his feet. Retrieving a rifle, he loaded it without even glancing down, his eyes systematically scanning the burning rooftop for the cyborg's position. Locating his target again, Craig dropped to a knee and began firing. With a cry of dismay, Jim fled the hail of bullets and spreading flames, sliding down the roof tiles where he dangled from one hand before dropping to the grass and rolling down the sloped side lawn to his feet, clutching the feathered arrow shaft protruding from his shoulder as he searched for potential paths of retreat, disappearing into the miasma of smoke enveloping his home, the shadows stretching as the pink sun slipped behind the orange horizon. Hearing the cyborg's weak cough, Craig threw a grenade toward the sound, decimating 2 support beams from the Sanders front porch, the awning sagging and cracking as Craig turned to investigate a rustling behind the Sanders potted topiary bush. Lifting his rifle, he heard a pop and felt a searing pain in his leg. Growing faint at the sight of his own blood, he dropped the gun, lost his balance, and fell into the manicured lawn with an anguished wail. Jennifer Morrison sprang into action. No brainwashing necessary here, thank you very much. Racing to her husband's side, gripping his shoulder to drag him behind their car, demanding a return to couples counseling while using her silk scarf as a tourniquet for Craig's leg. "Good one, Bill," Jim chuckled, limping into a cone of streetlight, gingerly touching the shaft of the arrow, a pistol waving in his other hand. "It's over, Jim," Bill coughed, the smoke on the wind stinging his eyes. "It's not over, Bill. This is just the way it happens this time. Jim cocked his empty pistol, wistfully eyeing Craig's abandoned weapons cache. What if I took you to my uncle and Maribel? Bill promised. And you can ask them yourself about that stupid-ass clock. Maribel is coming? Jim wavered. Yes, he's meeting us at the square, Bill ventured, sensing Jim's weakening resolve. Tonight. Like, tonight? Tonight? Jim repeated, stepping back into the smoke-filled shadows behind him, admitting, No, I can't risk it. He turned to flee but found Marci blocking his path, her sword at his throat. Not so fast, dickweed, Marci ordered, gesturing for Jim to drop his weapon and turn around. Jim threw his pistol aside, rolling his eyes. Across the street, Bill shouldered his longbow, throwing his hands up in frustration, wordlessly conveying to Marci that he'd had the situation well under control. Marci widened her eyes in response, pursing her lips into a thin line to communicate her bafflement by Bill's annoyance, as they'd reviewed their battle plans several times in advance. There was a sudden rumbling, the ground quaking beneath them, unbalancing everyone and everything as the Finkles' garage exploded behind Bill. 3 giant ferrets burst through the roof and walls of the 2-car garage Godzilla style, emerging from a cloud of debris, screeching and bucking, wood particles, siding, pink insulation, and glass dusting over the neighborhood. A huge chunk of rebar and cement sailed overhead, plunging into the hood of the Morrison's tan sedan, shattering their front window and setting off their car alarm to second their cries of fright. One of Jim's cherished electric dune buggies, speakers blaring the ferret's soothing yacht rock, zipped out of the debris cloud, darting around the panicked rodent's feet, drifting to a halt on the street between Bill and Marci, both staring slack-jawed at the ruin of their home. Marched by Marci at sword point, Jim limped to the passenger seat of the buggy, dramatically clutching his shoulder, offering the Morrisons a casual nod of greetings as he passed, and little resistance as he was strapped to the front seat with a bungee cord Marci produced from an oversized tote. It was then he heard Alice's strained cries of,
Help me, Jim!
From her tenuous perch in a ferret's tasseled saddle, her bound hands reaching for him as the ferret whinnied and reared. Pointing to the ferrets, Marci sputtered, Esteban, I said bring the robot, the dune buggy, the clock, and the fireworks. The fuck is this? You said bring Miss Alice, the dune buggy, the clock, and the ferrets at exactly 8:34 p.m. I remember. Esteban tapped his temple cheerfully, helping Bill strap the Finkles clock into the back seat beside the Sanders, Jim's eyes bulging as he noticed his missing clock. I'm pretty sure I said bring the fireworks, Marci scolded, picking debris from her hair. I hear ferrets. Esteban shrugged, sliding back into the driver's seat, a slim cigarillo clenched in his white, even teeth. Which way, Jefe? Marci and Bill stepped onto the bumper of the buggy, each gripping the roll bar with one hand. To the Plainview Town Square, Marci commanded, her sword held high. And step on it! Bill pointed north with the tip of his longbow. Andale! Esteban circled the ferrets twice, shouting in Spanish until they fell into a trot behind the buggy, Poot nipping happily at their heels. Astonished neighbors shouted and gobsmacked children cried, pointing to the giant ferrets trundling past their homes. We have got to move, one agitated lady declared, slamming her front door closed with a